Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the Automatic Activation Device, the AAD. Remember, the AAD monitors your altitude and freefall speed and can automatically deploy your reserve parachute. Like the reserve static line, an AAD is only a backup device. Remember, your number one priority in freefall is to deploy your parachute at the planned altitude or higher, but there are situations where having an automatic activation device as a backup to deploy your reserve parachute make it a little bit safer. There are different manufacturers and different models of AADs that operate a little bit differently based on how they're configured. No matter what type of AAD you do buy, make sure you look up the owner's manual and read through it to understand the differences in operations and differences in configurations. For example, the student mode AAD is designed to deploy the reserve parachute if you have a malfunctioning main parachute. If the reserve deploys while your main parachute that's malfunctioning is still attached, there is a risk that the reserve can become entangled with the main parachute. The idea is that if you already have a malfunctioning main parachute, it's better to get as much material out there as possible to slow you down. If you execute your emergency procedures at 2,500 feet, the decision altitude, this isn't a situation you'll have to worry about. The student mode is designed more for jumpers that may not have the situational awareness yet to execute the emergency procedures at the decision altitude of 2,500 feet. This is why it's important not to do any hard turns below 1,000 feet with a student mode Cypress. If you're doing a hard turn below 1,000 feet, it is possible for a student mode AAD to deploy the reserve parachute into your main parachute. This creates a very dangerous situation. Students are allowed to jump either a student mode or an expert mode AAD during their student jumps. An expert mode Cypress has a little bit higher speed tolerance for deploying the reserve parachute automatically. The expert mode assumes that the person jumping has the situational awareness to cut away the main parachute before deploying the reserve parachute. You'll learn more about the tandem mode, speed mode, and wingsuit mode later on. Checking that your AAD is on and that it's in the correct mode is a critical part of a gear check. As you start to learn how to do gear checks for your own equipment and how to give other jumpers a gear check, here's some key things to remember. First, find a process that works for you and do it the same way every time. If you get distracted during a gear check, stop what you're doing, restart the entire process over. There are times at a drop zone when you may feel rushed or hurried to get to the airplane to meet the load. Never rush a gear check. When you rush, things get missed. In order to do a complete gear check, you'll need to understand how the three-ring release system operates.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the three-ring system on your rig. The three-ring system, besides the parachute, is probably one of the most important components of your rig. This system is what holds your canopy or your parachute to your rig. Also, it is meant to be a quick release system should you ever need to cut away and get rid of your main canopy. The reason it's called a three-ring system is pretty simple. It consists of 3 rings, and these 3 rings hold everything together. Also, you have a closing loop that runs through the top ring and is secured in the back through a grommet and a piece of cable. Now, I know you can't see that right now, but once we get this completely disassembled, I'll be able to show you each individual component, and then we'll show you how to assemble this back. The reason we're going to be showing you this is, number one, it is a requirement on your A license card. You have to know how to do that in order to be signed off on it. And second of all, as a skydiver, you're responsible for your own skydive, and it's always a good thing to know exactly how your system works. And later in the video, again, we'll show you how this looks, each individual component when it's apart, and then we'll show you how to put it back together. Okay, now we're looking at part of a 3-ring system that is completely disassembled. I've only disassembled the one on the left side of my rig. I've left the one on my right side of the rig intact. But just know that the right side and the left side are assembled in exactly the same way. The three-ring system, again, of course, consists of three rings. The biggest one is attached to your rig, and then the other two, becoming progressively smaller, are attached to your risers, which are attached to your lines, which are ultimately attached to your parachute. What ends up happening also on your riser, you have a piece of closing loop that is going to be run through the top ring. It's going to be run down through this grommet right here, down through another grommet on the cable housing, and then be ultimately secured by this nylon cable that runs down through your rig to your cutaway handle. If you ever had to pull your cutaway handle, this cable would come out, release this closing loop, and allow the three-ring system to disassemble and quickly getting rid of your main canopy if you were having a problem with it, and allow your reserve to go ahead and deploy. Here in just a second, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to assemble this, and hopefully it'll be pretty smooth, but it's pretty simple to do. It's not hard. It's just one of those things you don't do every day, but it is one of the things that you absolutely need to know how to do, first of all, for your A license. Second of all, just as a regular skydiver, you need to know how to do this. Before we assemble it, the one thing I want to make sure you need to know is before it's assembled, we want to make sure that we don't have any twists in our lines on our risers. We want to make sure our risers didn't get twisted once or twice or 3 times around, because if we do, we're really going to have a problem on our next skydive. So before it's assembled, we want to make sure our lines are straight, and then we will start to assemble the three-ring. Okay, now in this section of the video, I'm going to show you how to hook back up your three-ring system, and hopefully this goes smooth. I'm not going to make any promises. It's fairly simple to do, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. First of all, what you're going to do, after you make sure that you don't have any twists in your risers, you've got your 2 rings on your risers. First thing you're going to do is run the first ring, which is the second smallest, through the one that's attached to your rig. The next thing you're going to do is run the smallest ring through the second one. Now you've got your 3-ring system pretty much assembled, and now we're going to secure it. In order to do that, we're going to take this piece of closing loop, we're going to run it through the top ring, through the grommet on the riser, and I'm going to turn this over here so you can see it a little better. We also need to run it through the grommet that's on the cable housing. If I can get it through there. I'm going to hold it with this hand just to keep it held so it doesn't come back out of the grommets there. Then this piece of nylon cable, which again is attached to your cutaway handle, is going to run through that piece of closing loop. Once it's run all the way through there, there's a section here on the back. It's got a little pocket to run this excess cable through. We're going to run it through there, slide it up, and now basically our 3-ring system is completely secured and closed. Again, what I did first of all was run my second loop through the first one and my third loop through the second one. I took my closing loop, ran it through the top of the 3rd ring, down through the grommet in the riser, and then on the back side through the grommet on the cable housing, and last but not least, I ran the cable that is attached to our cutaway handle through that closing loop and then secured the excess in this pocket. This keeps it secure, and then if we ever had to pull our cutaway handle, that cable would come out, it would release the closing loop, which would allow this 3rd ring to come to the second to come to the first, and your risers would disappear from your rig, and basically you would be cutting away your main parachute and going to your reserve. The one thing I want to stress more than anything, this is not something that you do on a daily basis, not even a weekly basis, but it's something that's very critical and very important. And if you ever have any questions, there's no dumb questions in skydiving. Always ask an instructor, ask a rigger, anybody. they'd be more than happy to explain to you how all this works. But hopefully in today's video I've shown you the components of the three-ring system, how they work, and how you need to assemble it. And hopefully this will make it easier for you when you have to do this in front of your coach or instructor, and you can get signed off and get you a little closer to your A license.